The early morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged terrain of Mount Rainier National Park as 28-year-old geology student Jake Patterson adjusted his backpack straps and checked his GPS coordinates one final time. The Washington State landmark had always fascinated him, not just for its towering volcanic presence, but for the intricate network of lava tubes and geological formations that told the story of centuries past. What was supposed to be a routine 3-day solo expedition to collect mineral samples for his graduate thesis would soon become a harrowing test of human endurance that would grip the nation's attention for over a week. Jake had obtained all the proper permits and filed his hiking plan with the park rangers, meticulously outlining his intended route through the less-traveled southeastern slopes of the mountain. His girlfriend, Rebecca Davis, had voiced serious concerns about him venturing alone into such remote terrain, especially given the unpredictable weather patterns that autumn had brought to the Cascade Range. But Jake's confidence in his outdoor skills and geological expertise, built through years of fieldwork and wilderness experience, ultimately reassured her. He carried what he considered comprehensive safety equipment: headlamp with backup batteries, emergency whistle, fully stocked first aid kit, water purification tablets, emergency shelter, and enough freeze-dried food for 4 full days plus emergency rations. His satellite communicator would allow him to check in each evening, and his cell phone showed 3 bars of service at the trailhead, though he knew coverage would become increasingly spotty the deeper he ventured into the wilderness areas of the park. Before we continue with Jake's incredible story of survival against impossible odds, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying this content. We'd also love to know where you're watching from around the world. Drop a comment below and let us know your location. Your support helps us bring you more amazing rescue stories like this one, and we truly appreciate each and every one of you who follows along with these remarkable tales of human endurance. The first 2 days of Jake's expedition progressed exactly according to his carefully planned schedule. He collected rock and mineral samples from various geological formations, documented his findings with detailed photographs and GPS coordinates, and made extensive notes about the volcanic structures he encountered. The weather had been remarkably cooperative. Clear skies, mild temperatures hovering in the mid-50s during the day and dropping to the low 40s at night, and virtually no wind to speak of. He established his base camp near a pristine alpine lake on his second evening, enjoying the profound solitude and the spectacular view of the mountain's upper reaches, bathed in the golden alpenglow that photographers traveled thousands of miles to capture. As he sat beside his small campfire, eating a simple dinner of rehydrated beef stroganoff and instant coffee, Jake felt a deep sense of satisfaction and accomplishment as he reviewed his research progress and contemplated the quality of samples he had already collected. On the morning of his 3rd day, Jake made a decision that would change everything. While reviewing his topographical maps over breakfast, he noticed an area roughly half a mile from his planned route that his geological surveys indicated might contain an old lava tube system. These natural tunnels, formed by flowing molten lava that had long since cooled and solidified into smooth-walled passages, offered unique insights into volcanic activity and often contained mineral formations that were impossible to find anywhere else. His scientific curiosity got the better of his cautious nature, and he reasoned that a brief detour to examine these formations would significantly enhance his research and potentially provide material for additional academic papers. The decision seemed logical and safe. He would explore for a few hours, collect samples, and return to his established route well before evening. The entrance to the lava tube system was larger and more accessible than Jake had expected from his topographical analysis. Roughly 8 feet in diameter with smooth, rounded walls that spoke to the immense forces that had created this natural tunnel system centuries ago. The opening appeared completely stable and safe for exploration, with no signs of recent geological activity or structural weakness. Jake secured his climbing rope to a massive boulder near the entrance, testing the anchor point multiple times to ensure it would hold his weight safely. The professional-grade rope was rated for far more than his body weight and had been inspected and certified just months earlier. He began his descent into the volcanic formation with the methodical precision that characterized all his fieldwork, testing each handhold and foothold before committing his full weight. His headlamp illuminated the remarkable interior of the lava tube as he descended, revealing smooth, dark walls that bore the characteristic rippled patterns and flow marks of rapidly cooling volcanic material. The temperature dropped noticeably with each foot of his descent, and he could hear the distinct sound of water dripping somewhere in the darkness below. Always a significant find in volcanic terrain, as these water sources often contained unique mineral compositions. The geological formations were even more spectacular than he had anticipated, with multicolored mineral deposits creating brilliant streaks along the tunnel walls, where groundwater had deposited dissolved minerals over decades or centuries. Jake took numerous photographs with his digital camera, careful to document the exact locations and orientations of each formation for his research notes. He collected several small samples of particularly interesting mineral formations, placing each one in individually labeled specimen bags with detailed location and depth information. 25 feet down from the surface, the lava tube took an unexpected turn, angling sharply toward what appeared to be a much larger chamber system. Jake's excitement grew exponentially as he realized he might very well be the first scientist to document this particular formation, which didn't appear on any of the geological surveys he had studied in his preparation. He continued his descent with even greater care and attention, methodically testing each handhold and foothold against the smooth volcanic rock. The sound of dripping water grew significantly louder, suggesting the presence of a substantial natural water source, always a remarkable discovery in volcanic terrain. His rope still had plenty of length remaining, easily 40 feet or more, and he felt completely confident in his ability to return to the surface once his exploration and documentation was complete. The chamber he discovered defied all his expectations and represented what could potentially be a significant geological find. The space was roughly 15 feet in diameter, with a naturally domed ceiling that disappeared into darkness well beyond the reach of his headlamp beam. Ancient lava formations had created natural shelves, alcoves, and platforms throughout the chamber, each one potentially containing unique mineral specimens. In the center of the chamber floor, a small pool of crystal-clear water had formed from centuries of mineral-rich condensation dripping from the ceiling above. The water appeared to be constantly replenished, maintaining a consistent level despite the obvious evaporation that would occur in the chamber's relatively dry atmosphere. Jake spent well over an hour systematically documenting the chamber, taking detailed measurements with his surveying equipment, photographs from every conceivable angle, and extensive notes about the geological significance of each formation he observed. The scientific importance of his discovery filled him with tremendous professional pride and excitement as he imagined presenting his findings to his thesis committee and potentially publishing his research in prestigious geological journals. As Jake prepared to begin his careful ascent back to the surface and the world above, disaster struck with terrifying suddenness and without any warning whatsoever. A substantial section of the chamber wall, apparently weakened by recent heavy rainfall that had managed to seep through microscopic cracks and fissures in the rock layers above, gave way in a catastrophic collapse. The failure was complete and instantaneous. tons of volcanic rock, loose debris, and centuries of accumulated sediment crashed down into the chamber with a sound that was absolutely deafening in the confined underground space. The air immediately filled with choking clouds of dust and the acrid, sharp smell of pulverized volcanic rock. Jake was thrown to the ground by the concussion and pelted with smaller rocks and debris. When the avalanche of stone finally settled and the dust began to clear, Jake found himself in complete, absolute darkness. His primary headlamp had been knocked from his head during the collapse and lay broken and useless somewhere beneath the massive pile of rubble that now completely sealed his only route to the surface. In those first terrible moments of complete blackness and oppressive silence, panic threatened to overwhelm Jake's rational thinking entirely. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it echoing in the chamber, and his breathing became rapid and shallow as the full reality of his situation began to sink in. However, Jake forced himself to remain calm and think clearly, drawing on his extensive training in wilderness survival techniques and his natural, analytical problem-solving instincts that had served him well throughout his academic career. He remained completely still for several minutes, forcing his breathing to slow and his heart rate to decrease, while his eyes attempted to adjust to the absolute darkness. When no trace of light appeared, he carefully felt around the chamber floor until he located his backpack, which had been partially buried under smaller rocks and debris, but remained essentially intact. Inside, his hands found his backup LED flashlight and a small emergency candle, both exactly where he had packed them according to his standard safety protocols. The weak but blessed beam of his backup flashlight revealed the truly devastating reality of his situation in stark, undeniable detail. The shaft that had been his route to the surface, to safety, to the world of the living, was now completely blocked by what appeared to be an utterly impenetrable wall of massive boulders, loose rock, and compacted debris. The collapse had been so complete and thorough that no trace of the original opening remained visible. Some of the boulders were easily the size of automobiles, far too large for any human being to move, even under the best of circumstances. Jake played his flashlight beam across every inch of the collapse site, desperately searching for any gap or opening that might offer hope of escape, but found nothing except solid rock extending from floor to ceiling in every direction. Jake's immediate priority became conducting a thorough assessment of both his available resources and his current physical condition, approaching the task with the same methodical precision he brought to his scientific work. He had sustained numerous cuts and bruises during the rockfall, particularly on his arms and shoulders, where falling debris had struck him. But a careful self-examination revealed that nothing appeared to be broken or severely injured. His water supplies consisted of 2 one-liter bottles that remained completely intact, containing roughly 2 liters of clean drinking water, enough for perhaps 2 days under normal circumstances, but potentially much longer if he rationed carefully. His food supplies included energy bars, dried fruit, mixed nuts, beef jerky, and the remainder of his freeze-dried camping meals. Enough for approximately 3 days of normal consumption, or significantly longer with strict rationing. The small pool of water in the chamber represented a potential lifeline for longer-term survival, though he would need to find some method of purifying it to avoid waterborne illness. His emergency whistle seemed completely useless in this underground tomb, as no sound could possibly travel through the tons of solid rock that now separated him from the surface world. The psychological challenge of his situation proved every bit as daunting as the immediate physical concerns. Jake was forced to confront the truly terrifying possibility that no one would ever find him in this remote, completely undocumented location. His filed hiking plan with the park rangers indicated his general area of operations and his intended route, but this specific lava tube wasn't marked on any official maps or geological surveys. He wasn't scheduled to return to civilization for another full day, which meant it could be 24 to 48 hours before anyone even realized he was missing, and even longer before any serious search efforts could be organized and deployed. Even when a search did begin, the search area would encompass dozens of square miles of incredibly rugged, difficult terrain, and the blocked entrance to his underground prison would be virtually impossible to locate from the surface. Meanwhile, back in Seattle, Rebecca Davis was beginning to experience her own growing sense of unease and worry about Jake's safety. Throughout their relationship, Jake had been absolutely methodical about communication during his solo research expeditions, understanding how much his extended absences worried her. He had made a solemn promise to call her each evening during this particular expedition, using his satellite communicator device when cellular service wasn't available in the remote areas he planned to explore. When she didn't hear from him on the night he was supposed to reach the lava tube area, she initially attributed the silence to equipment problems, difficult terrain, or simply being too exhausted after a long day of hiking and research to make the call. However, when a second night passed without any contact whatsoever, Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that something was seriously wrong. Jake would never voluntarily leave her worried and anxious for this length of time, regardless of how tired he might be or what equipment problems he might be experiencing. Rebecca's first call went directly to Mount Rainier National Park headquarters, where she spoke at length with Chief Ranger David Kim, a 30-year veteran of park operations who had dealt with hundreds of missing hiker cases during his career. Ranger Kim took her concerns very seriously from the outset, especially given Jake's detailed and professionally prepared hiking plan and his well-established reputation as a responsible, experienced outdoorsman who never took unnecessary risks. However, Kim also had to explain the significant challenges that the Park Service faced in initiating a comprehensive search operation. The area Jake had planned to explore covered nearly 50 square miles of some of the most remote and difficult wilderness terrain in the entire park system, much of it accessible only on foot and requiring technical climbing skills to navigate safely. Weather conditions had deteriorated significantly since Jake's departure, with persistent low clouds and intermittent rainfall making helicopter search operations impossible until conditions improved. The initial search efforts were organized and deployed with impressive speed and efficiency, focusing first on Jake's planned route and the established campsite near the Alpine Lake, where he had intended to spend his second night. A team of 6 experienced park rangers and search volunteers reached the remote campsite after a grueling 6-hour hike through increasingly difficult and treacherous terrain, made even more challenging by the recent wet weather. They found Jake's tent pitched exactly where his detailed hiking plan indicated it should be, with all his overnight gear neatly organized inside according to his characteristically methodical approach to camping. His vehicle remained parked precisely where he had left it at the official trailhead, completely eliminating the possibility that he had simply changed his plans without notification and departed the area early. The discovery of his abandoned but undisturbed campsite transformed the situation from concern into genuine alarm. Something had definitely prevented Jake from returning as scheduled, and the possibilities were all potentially serious. Search and Rescue Coordinator Lieutenant Maria Santos, a highly experienced professional with over 15 years of wilderness rescue operations, immediately assembled a comprehensive search team of 12 experienced volunteers drawn from throughout the Pacific Northwest. The team included expert technical climbers, professional wilderness trackers, certified emergency medical technicians, and Duke, a highly trained German Shepherd search and rescue dog with an outstanding track record of successful finds in wilderness environments. However, the team faced enormous challenges from the very beginning of their operation. The terrain in Jake's intended research area was notoriously difficult and dangerous even under good conditions, featuring steep ravines, unstable rock formations, loose scree slopes, and numerous locations where an injured hiker could become trapped or completely hidden from view. The recent heavy rainfall had made conditions significantly more treacherous, with loose rocks, slippery surfaces, and reduced visibility creating serious hazards for the searchers themselves. As the search operation entered its third day without any trace of Jake or clues to his whereabouts, media attention began to intensify dramatically throughout the Pacific Northwest and beyond. Local television stations picked up the story of the missing geology student, and Jake's photograph began appearing on television screens, newspaper front pages, and social media feeds across the region. Rebecca found herself suddenly and unwillingly thrust into an intense media spotlight as reporters and news crews sought interviews about her missing boyfriend, his character, his experience level, and her thoughts about what might have happened to him. She struggled to maintain hope and composure while facing an endless stream of questions about Jake's wilderness experience, his mental state, his relationship status, and whether there was any possibility that he might have simply decided to extend his research trip without notifying anyone, a suggestion that anyone who truly knew Jake would find absurd. Deep underground in his natural prison, Jake was fighting his own increasingly difficult battle for both physical and psychological survival. His carefully rationed water supplies had dwindled to less than half a liter, forcing him to begin the dangerous and time-consuming process of collecting and attempting to purify the mineral-rich condensation that continuously dripped from various points on the chamber ceiling. Using his portable camping stove and its limited fuel supply, he could slowly boil tiny amounts of the collected water to eliminate potential harmful bacteria and parasites. The purification process was maddeningly slow and used precious fuel. It took several hours of careful collection and patient boiling to produce enough purified liquid for just a few precious sips. The taste of the mineral-heavy water was metallic, bitter, and generally unpleasant, but it represented nothing less than the difference between life and death in his underground tomb. Food rationing quickly became as much an exercise in psychological discipline and mental toughness as it was a matter of physical necessity. Jake methodically divided his remaining food supplies into daily portions, each one significantly smaller than his body wanted, but carefully calculated to sustain his basic metabolic needs for as long as possible. He forced himself to eat with deliberate slowness, chewing each bite thoroughly and trying every mental trick he could think of to make his brain feel satisfied with the meager portions. The energy bars, which had seemed like simple trail snacks just days earlier, became precious luxuries to be saved for moments when his morale reached its lowest points, and he needed something special to maintain his will to survive. He found his thoughts turning constantly to food, elaborate restaurant meals he had enjoyed in the past, his grandmother's legendary Sunday dinners, the simple but profound pleasure of fresh fruit, warm bread, or a cold glass of milk. The physical discomfort and challenges of his situation were more than matched by the immense mental and psychological challenge of maintaining hope, sanity, and the will to continue fighting for survival. Jake established rigid daily routines designed specifically to preserve his mental health and cognitive function. Morning exercise sessions to keep his body as functional as possible despite the confined space, afternoon periods dedicated to systematic exploration of every square inch of his underground chamber, and evening sessions where he wrote detailed notes about his experience in a small waterproof notebook he always carried for field observations. He talked to himself constantly throughout each day, describing his activities aloud in detail and sometimes carrying on elaborate imaginary conversations with Rebecca, his parents, his professors, and his closest friends. The sound of his own voice became a vital companion in the oppressive, tomb-like silence that surrounded him. His most productive and hopeful activity involved systematic, scientific attempts to find some other route out of the chamber besides the completely blocked entrance shaft. Jake carefully examined every surface of his prison with the thoroughness of the trained geologist he was, looking for cracks, fissures, or small openings that might lead to other passages in what he hoped might be a larger lava tube system. He discovered several small cracks and fissures in the chamber walls, but careful examination with his flashlight revealed that none were large enough for human passage, and most appeared to dead end after just a few inches or feet. His geological training and experience helped him understand the overall structure and formation of his underground environment, but that same scientific knowledge also confirmed the grim reality that natural escape routes were extremely unlikely to exist. The chamber appeared to be essentially a dead end in the lava tube system, with his now blocked entrance shaft representing the only feasible exit route that had ever existed. On the surface above, the search effort was expanding rapidly and dramatically as word of Jake's disappearance spread throughout the tight-knit outdoor recreation and wilderness rescue communities of the Pacific Northwest. Veteran climbers and experienced cavers from across the region volunteered their expertise and specialized equipment, bringing decades of combined experience in exploring the area's numerous rock formations, cave systems, and geological features. The search grid was methodically divided into detailed sections, with individual teams spending entire days meticulously combing through areas that casual hikers would normally traverse in mere hours. Every crevice, every potential shelter, every overhang or depression where an injured person might seek refuge was carefully and thoroughly examined. The searchers left no stone unturned, quite literally, as they investigated every possibility, no matter how remote or unlikely. Duke, the highly trained German Shepherd search dog, provided the most promising and encouraging lead on the fourth day of the search, when he showed intense and sustained interest in a specific area roughly half a mile from Jake's originally planned route. The location featured several interesting rock formations and clear evidence of ancient volcanic activity, making it a highly plausible place for a geology student to decide to explore and conduct research. However, repeated detailed searches of the immediate area by multiple teams revealed no obvious signs of human presence, no footprints in the soft soil, no disturbed vegetation, no equipment or personal items, and no visual evidence that anyone had recently visited the location. The search teams didn't notice the partially concealed entrance to the lava tube system, hidden as it was behind a natural cluster of large boulders and dense alpine vegetation that made it nearly invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. Weather conditions continued to significantly hamper the search efforts as a series of Pacific storm systems moved through the region, bringing periodic heavy rainstorms that made the already treacherous rock faces slippery and extremely dangerous for the search teams to navigate. Helicopter overflights were possible only during brief breaks in the cloud cover, when visibility improved enough for safe flying operations. The aircraft carried sophisticated thermal imaging equipment capable of detecting human body heat signatures from considerable distances. But the mountainous terrain and thick forest canopy made detection difficult under the best circumstances. The vast scale of the search area meant that even with dozens of volunteers and professional rescuers working around the clock in rotating shifts, large sections of terrain remained unexplored. Each passing day decreased the statistical likelihood of finding Jake alive, a grim reality that nobody wanted to acknowledge openly, but everyone involved in the search understood implicitly. By the sixth day of Jake's underground entrapment, his physical condition was beginning to deteriorate noticeably, despite his careful rationing efforts and systematic water collection activities. The constant stress of his situation, severely limited nutrition, and the persistently cold temperatures in the underground chamber were taking an increasingly serious toll on his body and overall health. He found himself sleeping for progressively longer periods, partly as a conscious strategy to conserve energy and partly because remaining awake meant confronting the harsh reality of his desperate situation. His clothing had become thoroughly damp from the chamber's high humidity and the condensation that formed on every surface, making it extremely difficult to stay warm even when wrapped in his high-quality sleeping bag. Small cuts and abrasions he had sustained during the initial rockfall were showing early signs of infection, despite his careful treatment with antiseptic supplies from his well-stocked first aid kit. The psychological and mental aspects of prolonged isolation in complete darkness were becoming increasingly difficult to manage and control. Jake experienced dramatic mood swings, alternating between periods of deep despair, where he seriously questioned whether he would ever be found alive, and bursts of determined optimism, where he convinced himself that rescue was imminent, and he just needed to hang on a little longer. He found himself having extraordinarily vivid dreams about being back on the surface, enjoying simple pleasures that he had previously taken completely for granted, feeling warm sunlight on his face, breathing fresh mountain air, enjoying a hot meal, or simply having an unlimited supply of clean water to drink. Waking up to the harsh reality of his underground prison became increasingly traumatic with each passing day, requiring tremendous mental effort and emotional strength to overcome the crushing disappointment and maintain his essential survival routines. Despite his progressively weakening physical condition and deteriorating morale, Jake absolutely refused to abandon his systematic exploration and analysis of the chamber that had become his world. On his 7th day underground, while examining a section of rock wall that he had looked at countless times before with increasing desperation, he noticed something that was genuinely different and potentially significant. A hairline crack that had previously seemed completely insignificant and unimportant appeared to be allowing a tiny draft of air to pass through, so slight that he could detect it only by holding a small piece of tissue paper near the opening and watching it flutter almost imperceptibly. Using his backup LED flashlight and a piece of highly reflective emergency blanket from his survival kit, Jake managed to create a makeshift signal mirror system that could bounce concentrated light toward the crack and, he hoped, potentially through to whatever lay beyond. The technique was admittedly a desperate long shot with minimal chances of success, but it represented his first potential means of communicating with the outside world since the collapse had trapped him. Meanwhile, the search operation on the surface was facing increasingly difficult decisions about resource allocation, volunteer safety, and the realistic limits of what could be accomplished with the available personnel and equipment. Several volunteers had suffered minor but concerning injuries while navigating the treacherous terrain, twisted ankles, cuts from sharp rocks, and one case of mild hypothermia from extended exposure to the cold, wet conditions. Weather forecasts predicted another major storm system approaching the area within 24 hours, which would bring dangerous lightning, heavy rain, and possibly even snow at higher elevations. Search Coordinator Lieutenant Santos knew from hard experience that they were rapidly reaching the limits of what could reasonably and safely be accomplished with traditional ground-based search teams alone. The difficult decision was made to bring in specialized cave and underground rescue experts from Oregon and California, along with highly sensitive acoustic listening equipment that might be able to detect sounds from underground spaces that conventional searching techniques could never locate. The crucial breakthrough that would ultimately save Jake's life came on the 8th day of his underground imprisonment, not through sophisticated high-tech equipment or systematic grid searching, but through the remarkable persistence and professional instincts of a volunteer searcher named Tom Bradley, A retired hard rock miner with over 3 decades of experience working in underground operations throughout the American West, Bradley had been methodically investigating every rock formation and potential cave entrance in his assigned search sector with the thoroughness that only comes from years of professional underground work. Something indefinable about the area where Duke had shown such intense interest continued to bother him on a subconscious level, and he found himself returning to that location repeatedly, despite the fact that multiple previous searches had found no obvious clues or evidence. On his 4th visit to the specific location, Bradley's experienced eye noticed something that less experienced searchers had missed: the arrangement of boulders and rocks near what he was beginning to suspect might be a concealed cave entrance seemed somehow unnatural, as if they had been disturbed or rearranged by some external force rather than simply settling into their current positions through natural geological processes. Working with extreme care to avoid triggering another potentially catastrophic rockfall that could injure or kill both himself and anyone who might be trapped below, Bradley and 2 other experienced searchers began the delicate and dangerous process of moving smaller rocks and loose debris away from what they increasingly believed was a blocked cave or lava tube entrance. The work proceeded slowly and methodically, requiring constant attention to the structural stability of the surrounding rock formations and careful analysis of how each moved stone might affect the overall stability of the pile. After several hours of backbreaking labor and nerve-wracking careful excavation, they succeeded in creating a small opening, barely large enough for a person to crawl through, that led into mysterious darkness below. Bradley's powerful headlamp penetrated the narrow opening to reveal the tragic scene of the completely collapsed lava tube shaft, with massive boulders and tons of debris filling what had obviously been a much larger opening before the catastrophic rockfall. However, Bradley's experienced eye, trained by decades of underground mining operations, also noticed something that immediately filled him with hope and excitement. The collapse appeared to be relatively recent rather than ancient, and more importantly, the specific configuration and arrangement of the fallen rocks suggested that there might still be significant open space below the debris pile. Most crucially, when the search team called down into the dark opening and then listened carefully in complete silence, they heard what was unmistakably the sound of a human voice calling back from somewhere deep in the darkness below. Weak and hoarse, but undeniably alive and conscious. The electrifying confirmation that Jake was indeed alive but trapped far underground immediately transformed the entire rescue operation from a search mission into a desperate race against time to save a life. Specialized cave rescue teams were emergency flown in from 3 different states, bringing with them sophisticated equipment specifically designed for working in confined underground spaces and unstable rock formations. The technical challenge they faced was absolutely enormous in scope and complexity. They needed to create a safe, stable access route through literally tons of precariously balanced rock without triggering another collapse that could kill both Jake and the rescuers attempting to reach him. Every single movement and action had to be carefully calculated, analyzed, and deliberate, with constant monitoring of the entire rock formation's structural stability using electronic sensors and traditional engineering techniques. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a structural engineer who specialized specifically in cave rescue operations and had been involved in similar rescues throughout North America, flew in from Colorado to take charge of the technical aspects of the extraction operation. Her detailed assessment of the collapse site was both encouraging and sobering in equal measure. The encouraging news was that Jake appeared to be in a structurally stable chamber well below the debris field, with adequate air circulation to keep him alive indefinitely and no immediate threat of further collapse in his immediate vicinity. The sobering news was that creating a safe rescue route would require the systematic removal of literally tons of rock, in a very specific sequence, with each individual step potentially taking many hours to complete safely, and any mistake potentially proving fatal for everyone involved. Jake's voice, transmitted up through the narrow communication channel that the searchers had painstakingly created, provided crucial information about his current condition and his underground environment that proved invaluable for planning the rescue operation. He reported that while he was conscious and mobile, he was significantly weakened by his week-long ordeal and his severely limited food and water supplies. Most importantly for the rescue planning, he confirmed that he had managed to locate and access a small but reliable water source within his chamber, and that his immediate survival needs were being adequately met for the time being. This critical information allowed the rescue team to focus entirely on the complex technical and engineering challenges of extraction, rather than rushing dangerously to provide emergency medical care or supplies. The rescue operation attracted intense national and international media attention as news outlets around the world recognized the compelling human drama unfolding in the remote wilderness of Mount Rainier National Park. Television crews from major networks set up sophisticated broadcasting equipment at the search site, providing continuous live coverage of the painstaking extraction efforts to audiences of millions. Rebecca found herself once again dealing with intense media attention and scrutiny, but this time the questions focused on hope, relief, and anticipation rather than fear and uncertainty. She maintained a constant vigil at the rescue site despite the primitive conditions and brutal weather, providing crucial emotional support and encouragement to Jake through the narrow communication channel that the rescuers had established and maintained. The actual physical extraction process began in earnest on the morning of Jake's 9th day underground, with the rescue team working in carefully coordinated shifts to prevent exhaustion and maintain the intense focus and attention to detail that the operation demanded. The rescuers employed a sophisticated combination of manual labor techniques and specialized hydraulic equipment to gradually and systematically create a stable access route through the collapsed material. Each individual rock and boulder had to be evaluated separately and individually. Some could be safely moved or rolled aside. Others had to be carefully broken into smaller, more manageable pieces using pneumatic tools, and still others served as crucial structural support elements that absolutely could not be disturbed without risking the catastrophic failure of the entire rescue operation. Jake's role in his own rescue was necessarily limited by his weakened condition and dangerous location, but his contributions proved absolutely crucial to the operation's ultimate success. Following detailed instructions radioed down from the rescue team above, he positioned himself in the safest and most protected area of his underground chamber and provided constant updates on conditions below ground. When debris occasionally shifted or new material fell from above during the extraction process, his immediate reports helped the rescuers adjust their approach and techniques in real time. His geological knowledge and scientific training proved invaluable as he described the chamber's structural characteristics and the stability of various rock formations around him, information that helped the engineering team make critical decisions about the safest approach to the rescue. After 18 grueling hours of continuous, meticulous work by rotating teams of specialists, the rescue team finally succeeded in creating an opening large enough and structurally stable enough for safe human passage. The first person to descend through the precarious shaft was paramedic Lisa Chen, who rappelled carefully through the narrow opening to provide immediate medical assessment and emergency care. Her first words upon reaching Jake, "You're going to be okay now, we're here to take you home," were heard by millions of television viewers around the world who had been following the rescue coverage with intense emotional investment. Jake's physical condition was remarkably good, considering his 9-day underground ordeal, though he showed clear signs of dehydration, malnutrition, and prolonged exposure to cold, damp conditions. The actual extraction of Jake from his underground prison required additional time, care, and specialized techniques, as his significantly weakened condition made it extremely difficult for him to assist effectively in his own rescue. A specialized full-body rescue harness was carefully lowered to him through the narrow shaft, and he was slowly and methodically lifted toward the surface while rescue workers continued their vigilant monitoring of the surrounding rock formations for any signs of further instability or potential collapse. The ascent took over 2 hours to complete safely, with frequent stops to rest and assess both Jake's condition and the structural integrity of their improvised rescue route. When Jake finally emerged into natural daylight after 9 days in absolute darkness, the emotional impact was overwhelming and profound for everyone present at the rescue site. Hardened rescue workers who had seen every conceivable type of emergency situation found themselves openly weeping with relief and joy. The moment was captured by dozens of cameras and broadcast live to audiences around the world, creating one of the most powerful and memorable rescue images in recent history. Jake's eyes, unaccustomed to any light after his extended period underground, required careful protection, and his first attempts to speak were barely audible whispers, expressing gratitude and disbelief at his salvation. Rebecca's long-awaited reunion with Jake at the rescue site became one of the most emotionally powerful and widely viewed images of the entire operation. Their embrace, captured by photographers and television cameras from every conceivable angle and broadcast around the world within minutes, represented not just personal relief and joy, but the triumph of human determination, professional expertise, and collaborative effort in the face of seemingly impossible odds. Jake's first coherent words to the assembled media representatives were heartfelt expressions of gratitude for the incredible team of volunteers, professionals, and specialists who had refused to give up the search despite the enormous challenges and apparently hopeless circumstances they faced. The comprehensive medical evaluation conducted at Seattle's prestigious Harborview Medical Center revealed the truly remarkable extent of Jake's physical resilience and survival instincts during his underground ordeal. Despite losing nearly 15 pounds of body weight and showing clear signs of mild hypothermia and moderate dehydration, he had successfully avoided any serious injury, illness, or permanent health consequences from his experience. His methodical rationing of limited resources and his systematic scientific approach to collecting and purifying water had been absolutely crucial factors in his survival. Doctors credited his extensive outdoor experience, his geological and scientific background, and his remarkable mental discipline with providing both the knowledge and psychological strength necessary to survive such an extreme and prolonged survival situation. Jake's extraordinary story quickly became a detailed case study in wilderness survival techniques and cave rescue operations, with his meticulous notes from his underground experience providing unprecedented and invaluable insights for both academic researchers and rescue professionals. His systematic documentation of his physical and psychological state during the 9-day ordeal offered researchers completely unique data about human endurance, adaptation, and mental resilience in extreme isolation conditions. The rescue operation itself became a widely studied model for interagency cooperation, volunteer coordination, and the effective integration of specialized expertise in complex emergency situations. The geological and scientific significance of Jake's accidental discovery wasn't forgotten or overshadowed by the drama of his rescue and recovery. The lava tube system he had been exploring when disaster struck proved to be previously unknown to science and geologically valuable for multiple research applications. Once the site was made permanently safe and structurally stable through professional engineering work, researchers from several universities were able to conduct the systematic scientific study that Jake had originally intended to perform. His graduate thesis ultimately incorporated not only his original geological findings and mineral analysis, but also his survival experience and the psychological aspects of his ordeal, creating a unique, interdisciplinary academic work that bridged geology, psychology, and wilderness survival studies. The rescue operation had lasting and profound impacts on everyone involved in the effort. Tom Bradley, the retired miner whose professional instincts and remarkable persistence had led directly to Jake's discovery, became a highly sought-after consultant for cave rescue operations throughout the Pacific Northwest and beyond. Dr. Walsh's innovative engineering techniques and equipment modifications developed during the extraction process were quickly adopted by rescue teams across the country and internationally. Rebecca and Jake's relationship, tested and strengthened by the crisis they had endured together, emerged stronger than ever before, and they married exactly 2 years later in a ceremony attended by dozens of the rescue volunteers, professionals and specialists who had worked tirelessly to save his life. For Jake personally, the experience fundamentally and permanently changed his perspective on risk assessment, safety preparation, and the immeasurable value of human connection and community support. While he continued his geological career and completed his advanced degree with distinction, he became a passionate advocate for improved safety protocols in solo wilderness research and a volunteer instructor in wilderness survival techniques at outdoor education centers throughout the region. His speaking engagements about the rescue experience drew audiences numbering in the thousands, but he consistently emphasized that his survival was due not merely to his own preparation and determination, but more importantly to the extraordinary dedication and expertise of the people who refused to stop searching for him, even when the situation seemed completely hopeless. The Mount Rainier lava tube rescue ultimately became recognized as one of the most celebrated and technically challenging cave rescue operations in American history, demonstrating conclusively that even in the most desperate and seemingly impossible circumstances, the combination of human determination, technical expertise, professional competence, and coordinated community effort can achieve results that seem to defy all logic and probability. Jake's 9 days of darkness and isolation had ended, not in tragedy and loss, but in a powerful and inspiring reminder of both the incredible strength of the human spirit under extreme duress and the extraordinary lengths to which people will go to save a fellow human being in distress, regardless of the personal risks and challenges they must face in the process.